The Twin Otter's engines faded into nothing, swallowed by Arctic wind and distance. I stood there on the landing strip, watching the red tail lights shrink to pinpricks, then vanish completely. Just like that, my only way out was gone for the next 2 weeks. Carter Banks hadn't even looked back. The guy practically sprinted to the plane after shoving a crumpled piece of paper into my hand, mumbling something about following the rules exactly. His fingers had been ice cold, trembling. I'd tried to ask him about the station's quirks, normal handover stuff, but he just shook his head and climbed aboard like the place was on fire. Now it was just me, my duffel bag, and Research Station Echo 7 squatting against the darkening sky like some industrial beetle. The structure looked exactly like the photos, prefab modules connected by enclosed walkways, all painted that awful government beige that somehow made it stand out more against the white landscape. Wind turbines spun lazily on the roof. Solar panels caught the last orange streaks of sunlight. The main door opened before I could knock. A woman with auburn hair and bright green eyes stood there, smile wide enough for a toothpaste commercial. "You must be Bodie. I'm Kelly Boyd, station coordinator." Her handshake was firm, warm. "Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze." The entrance led into a mudroom lined with parkas and boots. Kelly helped me hang my coat while keeping up a steady stream of chatter about meal schedules and laundry days. Normal stuff, except her voice had this tight quality, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. "Everyone's in the common room," she said, leading me down a narrow hallway. The walls were covered in safety posters and old photographs of previous crews. I noticed gaps where pictures had been removed, leaving bright rectangles on the faded paint. The common room was bigger than I'd expected. Couches, a kitchenette, bookshelves crammed with paperbacks and board games. 3 men looked up as we entered. "Team, meet Bodhi Patel, our new systems engineer." Kelly's hand touched my shoulder, steering me forward. "Bodhi, this is Wesley Schmidt, our meteorologist." Wesley was thin, maybe 40, with nervous eyes behind thick glasses. He stood to shake my hand, and I noticed him check his watch twice during the 3 seconds of contact. "Welcome," he said, his German accent slight but noticeable. His palm was damp. "Chase Bravo, geology," Kelly continued, indicating a younger guy built like he could bench press a snowmobile. Chase nodded but didn't get up, didn't offer his hand. His dark eyes focused somewhere past my left ear. "And Theo Estrada, our biologist." Theo did stand, did shake hands, but his grip lingered a beat too long while he studied my face. "Interesting," he said, though I had no idea what he found interesting about me. "How was your flight?" "Long, bumpy." I pulled my hand back. Carter seemed in a hurry to leave. The room went quiet. Wesley's fingers drummed against his thigh. Chase shifted on the couch. Even Kelly's smile flickered. "Well, 2 weeks out here can feel like 2 months, Kelly said, her cheerfulness cranking back up. "Let me show you to your quarters. You must be exhausted." She led me through more corridors, pointing out the lab spaces, the gym that was really just a treadmill and some weights, the communications room. Everything was clean but worn, like a rental car with too many miles on it. The fluorescent lights hummed. Our footsteps sounded hollow on the metal floors. "Here we are." She opened a door to reveal a small room with a single bed, desk, and narrow closet. "Bathrooms down the hall. You're sharing with Wesley, but he's very considerate about shower times." My duffel bag landed on the bed with a thump. I pulled out Carter's crumpled paper, smoothing it against my thigh. Kelly's eyes tracked the movement. "What's this about?" I asked, holding up the list. Her fingers found the Celtic knot pendant at her throat. "Oh, that. Just some guidelines we've developed over the years. Helps things run smoothly when you're isolated like this." I scanned the handwritten rules. The first few seemed logical enough. Don't go outside after 8 p.m., always sign the log when leaving the station, keep your radio on channel 7. But then they got weird. Don't acknowledge sounds from above. If you see someone you know outside, don't let them in. Never answer knocks that come in patterns of 3. "Kelly, what? Just follow them." Her voice had gone flat. All warmth evaporated. I know they seem odd, but trust me, follow them exactly. She touched her pendant again. Dinner's at 6. Get settled in. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat on the bed, reading through the list again. 15 rules total, each more unsettling than the last. Number 9 stood out. If the lights flicker 3 times, close your eyes and count to 30. Number 12. Don't investigate the sounds. What sounds? I unpacked slowly, placing my clothes in the closet, setting up my laptop on the desk. The station blueprints I'd studied during training were in my bag. I spread them out, trying to orient myself. The layout matched what I'd seen so far. Single story, 4 connected modules around a central hub. Living quarters in the north module, labs in the east and west, common areas and communications in the south. Definitely no second floor. Dinner was quiet. We ate reheated lasagna while Kelly maintained a stream of small talk about weather patterns and supply schedules. Wesley kept checking his watch. Chase pushed food around his plate. Theo watched me with that same intense curiosity, like I was one of his specimens. So, what exactly are we researching here? I asked, trying to break the weird tension. Climate data mostly, Kelly said quickly. Ice cores, atmospheric readings. Wesley handles the weather station. Chase studies geological changes. Theo's documenting how wildlife adapts to temperature shifts. And you? I coordinate. Make sure everyone has what they need. Compile reports for the home office. She stood, collecting plates. Who wants coffee? After dinner, I excused myself, claiming jet lag. Truth was, the atmosphere in that room made my skin crawl. Everyone trying so hard to act normal that it looped around to deeply abnormal. Back in my room, I reviewed the station's maintenance logs on my laptop. Everything looked routine, filter changes, generator checks, standard stuff. But the previous engineer's entries stopped being detailed about 3 weeks ago, reduced to single lines. All systems normal. No specifics, no numbers. Like Carter had stopped caring or stopped being able to focus. I changed into sweats and a thermal shirt, killed the lights at 9:30. The bed was narrow but comfortable. Wind rattled the walls. Somewhere, metal creaked against metal, probably the walkway connections flexing. Normal Arctic station sounds. At 9:47, footsteps started directly above my head. Slow, measured steps, like someone pacing, back and forth, back and forth. I sat up, heart hammering. The blueprints were still on my desk, visible in the pale light from the window. I traced the station's outline with my finger. My room was here, northwest corner of the living module. Above me should be nothing but roof, insulation, and empty Arctic air. The footsteps continued, not hurried, not aggressive, just walking. The ceiling didn't even creak. The sound seemed to come through it rather than from it, if that made sense. I grabbed my phone, ready to text someone, ask what the hell was happening. But rule number 12 blazed in my mind. Don't investigate the sounds. The pacing went on for 20 minutes. I lay there, rigid, counting each footfall. Finally, at 10:09, they stopped. Not gradually, not like someone walking away. Just stopped, mid-step, like someone had hit pause on a recording. I stayed awake for 2 more hours, waiting for them to start again. They didn't. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted into uneasy sleep, Carter's list crumpled in my fist. In the morning, I'd ask about the footsteps. I'd get answers. But somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew I wouldn't like them. The coffee mug hit the floor and exploded into white ceramic shards. Wesley stared at the spreading brown puddle like it was blood. You heard them too? His voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper. I'd brought it up casually, just dropped it into conversation between bites of scrambled eggs. Hey, weird thing, heard footsteps above my room last night. What's up with that? But Wesley's reaction killed any pretense of normal breakfast chat. "The heating ducts," Chase said loudly, too loudly, cutting across whatever Wesley was about to say. "They expand and contract, makes all kinds of weird noises." He shot Wesley a look that could have frozen antifreeze. "Right, Wes?" Wesley nodded rapidly, already on his knees with paper towels. His hands shook as he mopped up coffee. Yes, the ducts. Very noisy." Kelly hadn't moved from the stove, but I caught her watching us in the reflection of the microwave door. Her fingers were white where they gripped the spatula. "Ducks," I repeated. "On the roof." "Exactly." Chase stood, even though his plate was still half full. "I need to check the weather station. Excuse me." He left. Wesley finished cleaning and basically fled the room. Kelly finally turned around, her smile back in place but not reaching her eyes. "More eggs?" she asked. "I'm good." I pushed my plate away. "Actually, I should get to work. The heating system needs a full diagnostic." Her smile tightened. "Of course." The mechanical room was in the basement level, really just a shallow crawl space dug into the permafrost, but it housed all the important stuff: furnace, water heater, electrical panels, air handlers. I'd been down there for maybe an hour, running through pressure readings and checking filters, when footsteps echoed on the metal stairs. Theo appeared, having to duck under a low-hanging pipe. He moved carefully through the cramped space like he was trying not to disturb anything. "Cozy," he said. "It does the job." I didn't look up from my tablet where I was logging numbers. "You need something?" He crouched next to me, close enough that I could smell his coffee breath. "The footsteps aren't the worst thing." My fingers paused over the screen. "Okay." "Wait until you see what's outside." I turned to look at him properly. His hazel eyes were steady behind his glasses, no trace of joking around. "What's outside, Theo?" "You'll see. Everyone does eventually, but Bodhi..." He stood, brushing dust off his khakis. "When you do see it, don't react. Don't run. Don't scream. Just observe and remember that it can't come in unless you let it." That's incredibly unhelpful. I know. He headed for the stairs, but saying more would be worse. Trust me on that. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine maintenance. I checked every system twice, partially because I'm thorough, but mostly because focusing on work kept my mind off whatever the hell was going on here. The station's bones were solid, good engineering, well maintained despite being 20 years old. Everything worked exactly as it should, except for the part where people heard footsteps from a floor that didn't exist. Dinner was tense. We ate in near silence while Kelly tried to fill the void with observations about cloud formations and supply schedules. At 7:45, just as I was helping to clear plates, Chase suddenly stood. "You know what? I'm done with this." He grabbed his parka from the hook. "I'm going up there." Kelly's plate slipped from her hands, clattering in the sink. "Chase, no. They're just trying to scare the new guy." He was already zipping up, pulling on gloves. "Same thing they did to me, to all of us. Someone's up there making noise. Probably Theo with his weird experiments." "I'm literally right here," Theo said mildly. "Then it's someone else. Maybe Carter never left. Maybe he's hiding up there laughing at us." Chase headed for the door that led to the utility corridor. At the end of that corridor was a ladder. Roof access for maintenance. "Chase, please." Kelly's voice had gone high, desperate. "The rules..." "Screw the rules." He yanked open the door. "I'll be back in 10 minutes with a perfectly logical explanation." The door slammed behind him. We all stood frozen for maybe 3 seconds. Then Kelly sank into a chair, her face in her hands. Wesley started pacing, checking his watch obsessively. Theo just stared at the door. "Should we..." I started. "No." Kelly's voice was muffled by her palms. "We wait." So we waited. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Wesley's pacing got more frantic. At one point he went to the door, hand on the handle, but Kelly barked, "Don't!" and he backed away. At 8:15, the door opened. Chase stood there, parka still zipped. But something was wrong. His brown skin had gone gray pale, like all the blood had drained out. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. His eyes were wide, unfocused, looking through us rather than at us. "Chase?" Kelly stood slowly. "What did you see?" He shook his head, just kept shaking it, like he was trying to dislodge something from his brain. Without a word, he walked past us, down the hall toward the living quarters. We heard his door close, then the lock click. Wesley grabbed my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. He saw something up there. His breath was sour, panicked. We all have, but talking about it makes it worse. Makes what worse? He let go, backing away. Everything. It makes everything worse. I wanted to push, to demand real answers, but the naked fear in his eyes stopped me. Whatever was happening here, these people were genuinely terrified. This wasn't some elaborate hazing ritual. I went to my room early, around 9. Lay on the narrow bed fully clothed, waiting. The wind had picked up outside, howling around the corners of the station. Metal creaked. The heating system hummed. Normal sounds. Rational sounds. At 11 p.m. exactly, the footsteps started again. Same as last night. Slow, measured, pacing directly above my head. But now there was something else. A dragging sound between the steps, like someone pulling something heavy across the floor. Step, drag, step, drag. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to think logically. The roof was metal and insulation over a steel frame. Even if someone was up there, the wind chill was -40. They'd freeze in minutes. And the access ladder was in the utility corridor. I would have heard anyone going up. Step, drag, step, drag. The sound was getting louder, not closer, just more insistent, like whatever was up there wanted to make absolutely sure I heard it. My phone buzzed. A text from Theo. "Don't look outside." I hadn't even realized I'd been moving toward the window. My hand was inches from the blinds. I pulled back, returned to the bed. Step, drag, step, drag. Another text, this one from Kelly. "Emergency meeting tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. common room." Great. Something to look forward to. The pacing continued for another hour, that awful dragging sound making my teeth ache. Then, at exactly midnight, it stopped. Just like last night. Cut off mid-step, like someone had pulled the plug. I lay there in the sudden silence, Carter's list of rules crumpled in my hand, trying to make sense of it all. The footsteps. Chase's terror. Everyone's refusal to explain anything directly. One thing was becoming clear. Whatever was happening at Research Station Echo 7, it wasn't in the orientation manual. Kelly's fist hammered against my door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Emergency meeting now." I jerked awake, phone showing 3:07 a.m. My mouth tasted like copper. I'd been grinding my teeth again. Kelly was already pounding on Wesley's door as I stumbled into the hallway, still in the thermal shirt and sweats I'd fallen asleep in. The common room lights were off. Everyone stood clustered around the windows, their faces lit only by the pale blue glow from outside. Nobody spoke as I joined them. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. About 30 feet from the station, something stood in the snow. It was white, roughly the shape of a person, but everything about it was wrong. The arms hung down past where knees should be, the head tilted sideways at an angle that would snap a normal neck. It wasn't moving, just standing there like someone had built a snowman while drunk and given up halfway through. "When did you first see it?" Kelly's voice was barely a whisper. "I couldn't sleep," Chase said. His hands were shaking. In the dim light, I noticed something dark under his fingernails. Blood, maybe, dried and flaking. "Went to get water around 2:30 and saw it through the kitchen window." "You should have woken us immediately." Kelly's tone could have cut glass. "Every second matters." The thing outside still hadn't moved. I couldn't even tell if it was facing us or had its back turned. The proportions made it impossible to determine basic anatomy. "What is it?" I asked. "Not now?" Kelly turned away from the window. "Everyone knows the protocol. Lights off, doors sealed, no sound." They moved like they'd rehearsed this. Wesley killed the emergency lighting while Chase checked the door seals, running his fingers along the weather stripping. Theo pulled blackout curtains I hadn't even noticed before, plunging us into complete darkness. My eyes struggled to adjust. I could hear everyone breathing, the furnace humming through the vents, wind scraping snow against the walls. Then Wesley's voice, so quiet I almost missed it. It feeds on attention. Looking at it gives it power. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but something in his tone made me swallow them. We stood there in the dark, 5 people trying not to exist too loudly. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't dare check it. The light might show through the curtains. Time stretched like taffy. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been 2 hours. My legs started cramping from standing still. At some point, I heard Chase shifting his weight, a floorboard creaking under him. Kelly made a sharp inhaling sound, a warning. Finally, Theo whispered, "I'm checking." The curtain moved just a fraction. A sliver of blue light cut through the darkness. "It's gone," he said. Kelly hit the lights. Everyone blinked in the sudden brightness, looking wrung out and exhausted. Chase slumped onto the couch. Wesley was already at his watch, muttering numbers to himself. I went straight to the window. The thing was definitely gone, but it had left something behind. In the frost on the outside of the glass, symbols had been scratched. They looked almost like letters, but wrong, like someone writing in a language that used familiar shapes for completely different sounds. Kelly appeared beside me with a dish towel, already reaching to wipe the glass. "Wait," I said, pulling out my phone. The camera clicked twice before she could stop me. "Delete those." Her green eyes were hard as emeralds. "Now? Why? What are they?" She pressed the towel against the glass, erasing the symbols with quick, violent swipes. Nothing. Frost patterns, random scratches. Random scratches that you're in a real hurry to eliminate? "Drop it, Bodhi." Chase hadn't moved from the couch, but his voice carried a warning. "Just drop it." I looked around the room. Wesley was pouring himself coffee with shaking hands. Theo had his notebook out, sketching something. Kelly kept scrubbing the window even though the symbols were long gone. "Fine," I said. "I'm going back to bed." Nobody tried to stop me. Back in my room, I sat at my desk with my laptop, but I didn't open it right away. Instead, I looked at the photos on my phone. The symbols were clearer than I'd expected, standing out sharp against the frost. They definitely weren't random. There was a pattern, a repetition. 3 symbols appeared multiple times in different combinations. I transferred the photos to my laptop and opened the station's maintenance database. Every Arctic research station kept detailed logs, equipment failures, weather events, personnel issues. It was all supposed to be transparent, available for review. The first few years of logs were exactly what I'd expected. Broken heating units, storm damage, a generator failure that required emergency evacuation. Normal Arctic problems with normal solutions. But as I scrolled forward, things got interesting. 15 years ago, an engineer named Marcus Webb reported unusual acoustic phenomena and visual anomalies consistent with extreme cold hallucinations. The next engineer, Sarah Chen, described recurring perimeter disturbances and requested additional security measures. Each subsequent engineer had similar reports, growing more detailed and more disturbing. Then, 5 years ago, the reports just stopped. Not stopped as in the incidents ended. Stopped as in someone had replaced all the entries with bland, perfectly normal maintenance logs. Same format, same technical language, but absolutely nothing unusual. Every log for the past 5 years could have been copied from a textbook on Arctic station management. I dug deeper, looking for the original files. The database showed they'd been overwritten, but whoever did it was sloppy. They'd left fragments in the backup partition, incomplete sentences, partial entries that painted a very different picture. And the figures appear nightly now. Kelly insists we maintain the fiction. Wesley knows more than he admits. Can't trust anyone here. That last fragment was from Curtis Yang, the engineer from 2 years ago. According to the official logs, Curtis had completed a normal rotation and left without incident. But this fragment was dated 3 days before his scheduled departure. I kept searching, pulling up everything I could find on the station's history. Research papers, government reports, even social media posts from former staff. Most of it was routine, boring even. But there were gaps. People who worked here and then just stopped posting online, stopped publishing papers, stopped existing in any meaningful digital way. My phone buzzed. A text from Theo. Stop digging. Not safe on station network. Meet me at breakfast. Bring coffee. I closed my laptop, suddenly very aware that all my searches had gone through the station's satellite connection. If someone was monitoring network traffic, they'd know exactly what I'd been looking at. Outside my window, dawn was breaking, painting the snow orange and pink. Beautiful, if you didn't know what came out there at night. I thought about the white figure, those 2 long arms, that tilted head. Wesley said it fed on attention. But what did that mean exactly? And why did everyone act like this was just another Tuesday? The photos on my phone seemed to pulse with importance. Those symbols meant something. The covered-up logs meant something. The fear in everyone's eyes meant something. I'd come here to maintain equipment and earn enough to pay off my loans. Simple plan. But now I was neck-deep in something that went back years, maybe decades. Something the whole team was in on. Something they were desperate to keep hidden. My phone showed 5:47 a.m. Breakfast was usually at 7, but Theo wanted to meet early. That meant he had something to tell me, something he didn't want the others to hear. I pulled on proper clothes, grabbed my phone and notebook. The symbols were still on my screen, cryptic and somehow threatening. Whatever they meant, Kelly hadn't wanted me to see them. That alone made them worth investigating. The hallway was quiet. No footsteps above, no mysterious sounds. Just the normal hum of a research station pretending everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. 15 years of engineers had reported the same phenomena. 5 years ago, someone had started covering it up. And now I was here, the latest in a long line of people who'd seen things that weren't supposed to exist. I thought about Carter Banks, practically running to that plane. He'd lasted 2 weeks. I was on day 3, 11 more days to go. The radio crackled to life while I was elbow deep in wiring, trying to trace a short in the communications array. At first I thought it was just static, the kind you get when solar activity messes with the satellites. Then the singing started. A woman's voice, soft and clear like she was standing right behind me. The melody was old, something between a lullaby and a hymn, but the words made my skin crawl. There's a man in the cold, in the cold, in the cold, standing right outside your door. I spun around, nobody there. Just me in the cramped communications room with its walls of equipment and blinking lights. The singing continued, getting louder. He's been waiting so long, oh so long, oh so long. Won't you let him in for sure? My hands fumbled with the radio controls. Channel dial, volume, power switch. Nothing worked. The song kept playing through speakers that should have been connected to completely different systems. Weather monitoring, emergency frequencies, not whatever this was. He knows where you're sitting, where you're sitting, where you're sitting. 3rd chair from the left wall. I looked down. 3rd chair from the left wall, exactly where I was. The woman's voice grew stronger, more insistent. The melody shifted into something darker, notes that didn't belong in any scale I knew. He can see through the window, through the window, through the window. See your frightened little face. I grabbed the channel selector and yanked, spinning through every frequency we had. The singing didn't skip, didn't static, didn't change. It was like it wasn't coming through the radio at all, just using it as a mouth. Open up the door now, door now, door now. Let him in from the cold. The wrench was in my hand before I made the conscious decision. Heavy steel, the kind that could crack a skull, or in this case, destroy about $30,000 of government equipment. I brought it down hard on the main receiver. Plastic shattered, circuits sparked. The singing warbled and died mid-word. The door slammed open. Wesley stood there, eyes wide behind his thick glasses, taking in the destroyed radio. Theo pushed past him, saw the wrench still in my hand, the smoking remains of our primary communications system. "You did the right thing," Theo said quietly. Wesley's face went from pale to red in about 2 seconds. That was our only long-range radio. How are we supposed to contact anyone? What if there's an emergency? "There are worse emergencies than being out of contact," Theo said. "You don't get to make that call." Wesley's hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. Pure rage. "We have protocols. We have systems. You can't just, both of you, stop." Kelly stood in the doorway, and she was carrying something. Another radio, identical to the one I'd just destroyed, still in its protective case. "We always keep spares." The way she said it, the weight she put on "always," made it clear this wasn't the first time someone had smashed the communications equipment. Wesley grabbed the replacement from her, cradling it like a baby. "This is insane. We can't keep destroying equipment every time something weird happens." "The song," I said. It knew where I was sitting. They all went quiet. Kelly's hand found her pendant. Wesley's anger deflated like someone had punctured him. Even Theo looked uncomfortable. "The song is new," Kelly said finally. We haven't had that before." "Great. So, it's evolving." I set down the wrench, noticed my hands were trembling. "Getting creative." "We should install the replacement," Wesley said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Can't be completely cut off." They filed out, leaving me to clean up the mess and install the new radio. But as I pulled the destroyed unit from its housing, I noticed something. A panel on the bottom that didn't match the original construction. Newer screws, different metal. I pried it open. Inside was a hidden compartment, maybe 4 inches square, packed with micro-cassette tapes, the kind nobody had used in 20 years. Each one labeled with a date and a name. Sarah Chen, day 5, Marcus Webb, day 9, Curtis Yang, day 12. All previous engineers. I pocketed Curtis's tape. The others would notice if I took them all, but one might slip by. My hands moved on autopilot, installing the replacement radio, testing the connections, making sure everything worked. Normal engineer stuff while my brain raced through implications. Someone had been recording the engineers, documenting their experiences, and then hiding the evidence in the equipment most likely to get destroyed when things went wrong. Back in my room that night, I waited until I heard Wesley's door close, then dug out my old Walkman from the bottom of my bag. I'd brought it for nostalgia, loaded with music for the long Arctic nights. The cassette player still worked, even if the headphone jack was touchy. Curtis Yang's voice was younger than I'd expected. He had a slight Boston accent and sounded tired, like he'd been awake for days. Day 12. I can't trust my own eyes anymore. The figures are getting bolder. Last night, one pressed its face against my window for 3 hours. I could see through it, like looking through frosted glass at something that used to be human. Kelly keeps saying it's fine, that they can't get in, but she's lying about something. They all are. Wind rattled my window. I paused the tape, listened, just wind. I hit play again. I found documents in Wesley's room when he was in the shower, old government files about this place. The station isn't 20 years old, it's 40. They just keep rebuilding it every time something happens. Every time someone... God, I can't even say it. But the worst part? One of them isn't who they claim to be. I've been watching, comparing their stories to the files. Someone here is lying about their entire identity. I think it might be... The recording cut to static. Not the normal end-of-tape static, but something harsh and violent. Then screaming. Curtis screaming. Other voices too, muffled and distorted. The screaming went on for 30 seconds before cutting off completely. I pulled off the headphones, my ears ringing. Curtis Yang had left on schedule according to the official logs. Completed a normal rotation, no incidents. But that screaming said otherwise. I was reaching for my laptop, planning to dig deeper into Curtis's story, when I heard it. My own voice, clear as day, coming from outside my window. "Bodhi, come outside. I need to show you something important." I froze. The voice continued, patient and friendly. Exactly how I sounded when I was trying to explain something technical to someone. "It's about the radio, Bodhi. About what you found. I can explain everything." My feet moved toward the window without my permission. My hand reached for the blinds. The voice outside was so perfectly mine that for a second I wondered if I was having some kind of breakdown, if maybe I'd already gone outside and was calling to someone else. "Please, Bodhi. It's cold out here. We need to talk about Curtis, about what really happened to him." My fingers touched the blind cord. One pull and I'd see whatever was pretending to be me. One look and I'd know. The rules. Carter's rules. Number 7. Never let in anyone you know who appears outside. But this wasn't someone I knew. This was me. My voice, my inflection, my way of speaking. How was that possible? How could something copy me so perfectly? "Bodhi, your mother is here too. She's worried about you." My hand jerked back from the blinds like they were electrified. My mother was in Minnesota. My mother was definitely not standing outside an Arctic research station in the middle of the night. "Bodhi, sweetheart, please come out." Her voice now, warm and concerned, with that slight Hindi accent she never quite lost. "I came all this way to see you. Don't leave me out in the cold." I backed away from the window, grabbed my headphones, shoved them over my ears. Music, loud and aggressive, drowning out the voices, but I could still feel them out there, waiting, wearing my voice like a mask. Whatever was happening at this station, it was getting worse. And Curtis was right. Someone here was lying about who they were. I just had to figure out who before I ended up on a cassette tape in a hidden compartment. My screams the only proof I'd ever existed. The voices outside my window kept going all night. My own voice, patient and reasonable, explaining technical details about the heating system. My mother's voice, crying now, begging me to help her, saying she was freezing. At one point, my ex-girlfriend joined in, which was almost funny in a horrible way. Like whatever was out there had downloaded my entire emotional history and was throwing it at the walls to see what stuck. I sat on my bed with my hands pressed over my ears, but it didn't help much. The voices weren't really coming through my ears anyway. They were in my bones, in my teeth, in the air I was breathing. Around 3 a.m., the doorknob started rattling. Not a polite testing to see if it was locked, but violent shaking like someone was trying to rip it off. The whole door frame shook. I watched the lock mechanism strain against the assault, waiting for it to snap. "Bodhi, please." My father's voice now, which was impossible since he'd been dead for 3 years. "I'm so cold, just for a minute. Just let me warm up." The rattling got worse. Paint flakes fell from where the hinges met the frame. I grabbed my desk chair and wedged it under the handle, then pushed my bed against the door for good measure. The voices outside shifted from pleading to anger. "You ungrateful little..." My mother's voice, but wrong, like someone had learned the words but not the emotion behind them. "After everything I've done for you..." Then screaming. Not human screaming, something that just used human vocal cords as a starting point before twisting into frequencies that made my molars ache. The sound went on for 20 minutes straight. No breaks for breath, no variation, just pure sonic assault. When dawn finally broke, the screaming cut off mid-note. Silence rushed in like water filling a vacuum. I stayed barricaded in my room another hour, waiting to make sure it was really over. At breakfast, everyone looked like they'd been through their own version of hell. Wesley had scratches on his neck. Kelly's hands shook as she poured coffee. Chase stared at his eggs like they might start talking. I set my Walkman on the table, Curtis Yang's tape already loaded inside. "One of you isn't who you say you are." The words landed like a grenade. Wesley's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. Kelly's spatula clattered against the pan. Chase actually looked up from his eggs. "What are you talking about?" Kelly's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white around her coffee mug. I hit play. Curtis's tired voice filled the kitchen, talking about the documents he'd found, the lies, someone's false identity. When it got to the screaming part, I let it run. All 30 seconds of Curtis Yang's final moments. Wesley lunged for the player, but Chase was closer, grabbing it first. They struggled for a second before Kelly brought her hand down hard on the device, smashing it into plastic fragments. The tape ejected on impact, skittering across the floor. "Enough!" She was breathing hard, face flushed. This is exactly what it wants. Us turning on each other, suspecting each other, tearing ourselves apart from the inside. It? I looked around the room. We're calling them it now? These things that wear our voices, that know where we're sitting, that used to be engineers like Curtis? Nobody answered, but I caught something, just a flicker. Theo and Chase looked at each other, not a casual glance, but the kind of look that carries whole conversations. "I need to check the weather instruments," Wesley announced, suddenly, practically running from the room. "Coward," Chase muttered, then seemed surprised he'd said it out loud. Kelly started cleaning up the smashed cassette player, sweeping the pieces into her hand with mechanical precision. We're all on edge. The isolation, the phenomena, it gets to everyone differently. "The phenomena," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling 40 years of engineers disappearing?" She froze. 20 years. The station is 20 years old. Curtis found documents that say otherwise. Curtis was paranoid and sleep-deprived by the end. She dumped the plastic pieces in the trash. "Just like you're becoming." Theo stood up. "I should get back to my research." I followed him. Not subtle about it either, just walked right behind him through the corridors to his lab. He didn't try to stop me, didn't speed up or slow down. Like he'd been expecting this. His lab was supposed to be for studying Arctic wildlife. That's what the nameplate said, what the equipment suggested at first glance. Microscopes, sample containers, reference books about polar ecosystems. But Theo walked past all of that to a locked cabinet in the back corner. "You might as well see," he said, pulling out a key. "You're not going to stop digging anyway." Inside the cabinet were hundreds of photographs pinned to corkboards. The white figures captured from every angle, in various stages of transformation. Some looked almost human still, just pale and stretched. Others were so distorted I couldn't tell what they'd started as. "Jesus," I breathed. "Keep looking." Behind the photos were cassette tapes, dozens of them, each labeled with names and dates going back 15 years, not just engineers, cooks, researchers, maintenance staff. Below those, notebooks filled with observations, theories, diagrams of the station marked with X's where people had vanished. But the thing that stopped me cold was at the bottom of the cabinet, a device about the size of a car battery, covered in wires and circuits I didn't recognize. It looked homemade, but sophisticated, like something Tesla might have built if he'd had access to modern components. "It's a receiver," Theo said, "or it will be when it's finished." A receiver for what? For them. The figures, The voices, whatever they are, they're trying to communicate. The songs, the mimicry, even the symbols on the windows. It's all language. They're trying to tell us something. I stared at him. You're not studying Arctic wildlife. He smiled, but it was the saddest expression I'd ever seen. I'm studying them. The previous staff members who didn't follow the rules, or maybe who followed them too well. He picked up one of the photographs, a figure that still had recognizably human features beneath the distortion. The station doesn't protect us from them, Bodhi. It creates them. What do you mean, creates? The lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Went out completely, leaving us in absolute darkness. The emergency lighting should have kicked in immediately, but nothing happened. Even the LED indicators on the equipment went dark. In that perfect blackness, a voice whispered from somewhere much too close. He knows too much now. It sounded like Wesley, but Wesley had left to check the weather instruments, which meant either he'd followed us somehow or... The emergency lights kicked in with a dull red glow that made everyone look like they were already covered in blood. Wesley stood in the doorway and he was holding a gun. Not some modern tactical thing, an old military pistol that looked like it had stories to tell. His nervous, twitchy demeanor had vanished completely. The man pointing a weapon at us was calm, steady, and absolutely certain about what he was doing. The station needs its sacrifices, he said, like he was explaining a simple math problem. One engineer every cycle. That's how it's always worked. I looked at Kelly and Chase, waiting for them to react, to stop him. They just stood there. Kelly's hand wasn't even reaching for her pendant. Chase had his arms crossed, watching me with something that might have been pity. You're all in on it. The words came out flat, not a question. We're not scientists, Kelly said, and her warm maternal voice had gone cold and professional. We're guardians. We maintain the station's purpose. Which is what, exactly? Feeding engineers to those things outside? Wesley's grip on the gun never wavered. The rules aren't for protection, Bodhi. They're conditioning. Teaching you to accept the impossible, to stop questioning, to follow instructions even when they make no sense. Makes the transition easier. Transition. I took a step back, bumped into Theo's equipment cabinet. You mean transformation? Into one of those white figures. The station requires it, Chase said. He actually sounded apologetic, like he was sorry my car got towed or something equally mundane. Without the sacrifices, without maintaining the cycle, something much worse happens. Theo moved then, stepping between me and Wesley's gun. His shoulder was tense, ready. I've been investigating you for months, he said, documenting everything. The previous engineers, the cover-ups, the lies. This ends now. Wesley laughed. It was the worst sound I'd heard since the screaming on Curtis's tape. You think you're the first to try? We've been doing this for 40 years, Theo. 40 years of idealistic researchers thinking they can break the cycle. But I did something you didn't expect. Theo's hand moved to his pocket. I finished the receiver. He pulled out a small remote and pressed a button. The homemade device in his cabinet hummed to life, sending out a signal I could feel in my teeth. Outside, something answered. The white figures came all at once. Not one or two, but dozens, pressing against every window, their distorted faces leaving frost patterns on the glass. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. You broke your own rules, Theo gasped, and I saw he was already shivering violently. You acknowledged them, gave them power. Wesley's calm cracked. He swung the gun toward Theo and fired. The sound was impossibly loud in the small space. Theo spun and hit the floor, blood spreading from his shoulder, but he was smiling. Too late, he whispered. The first window shattered. Not broke, shattered, like it had been flash frozen and hit with a hammer. A white figure flowed through, moving wrong, joints bending in ways that hurt to watch. Wesley fired 3 times. The bullets passed through it like it was made of fog. Kelly screamed something about containment protocols. Chase ran for the door. More windows were breaking, the sound like a glacier cracking. The emergency lights flickered, and in the strobe effect, I saw them clearly. Dozens of former engineers, former staff, all transformed into these impossible things, all coming home. I ran. Not brave, not heroic, just pure animal instinct taking over. Through the kitchen where something that might have been Sarah Chen was pulling itself through the window. Down the corridor where Marcus Webb's stretched form was seeping through ventilation grates. Wesley was behind me, shouting, still trying to maintain control even as his perfect system collapsed. The supply shed, emergency beacon. It was the only clear thought in my head. The door to the outside was already open, cold air rushing in like water through a breach. I grabbed a parka from the hooks, didn't bother with proper gear, just ran into the Arctic night. The cold hit like a physical wall, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, Wesley burst out of the station. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without the cycle, without the rules." A figure rose from the snow between us. Even in the darkness, I recognized the distorted features. Marcus Webb, the engineer from the recordings, already transformed, but still human enough to remember who'd betrayed him. He moved toward Wesley with horrible purpose. Behind me, Wesley screamed, a sound that cut through the night before going suddenly, horribly silent. The supply shed was 50 yards away. My hands were already numb, my face burning from the cold. I could hear chaos from the station, gunshots, screaming, glass breaking. The emergency beacon was exactly where the manual said it would be, a bright orange case marked with warnings in 3 languages. I activated it, watched the light start blinking, knew it was sending a distress signal to every military and research facility in range. The snowmobile keys were hanging on a hook like they were waiting for me. The engine started on the 3rd try. Wesley must have prepped it for the next supply run, not knowing he'd never make it. I didn't look back, just pointed it away from the station and opened the throttle. I drove for 3 hours before collapsing from hypothermia. The helicopter found me 2 days later, half dead in the snow. Military, not civilian. They'd been monitoring the station's emergency frequencies as part of some classified protocol. They wrapped me in thermal blankets, gave me hot coffee, asked me what happened. I told them there was a fire, equipment malfunction. Everyone else was dead. They'd find bodies after all. Wesley, Kelly, Chase. The white figures wouldn't leave anything recognizable, but there would be remains. Through the helicopter window, I watched Research Station Echo 7 burning in the distance. The white figures must have knocked over something flammable. Or maybe Theo's receiver overloaded. Orange flames against the endless white, smoke rising into the polar night. Hell of a thing, the medic said, checking me for frostbite. "Lucky you got out." "Yeah," I said. "Lucky." But I knew better. The station would be rebuilt. It always was. New Guardians would be recruited, told they were protecting the world from something worse. New engineers would arrive, be given rules that made no sense, be slowly conditioned to accept their fate. The cycle would continue because that's what cycles do. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about Theo, bleeding in his lab, surrounded by 40 years of evidence that hadn't saved anyone. Tried not to think about Carter, transformed after just 2 weeks, seeking revenge that wouldn't bring him back. Tried not to think about my own voice, still out there somewhere in the Arctic, calling to whoever would listen. The helicopter flew south, carrying me away from the station, but not from what I'd learned there. Some things you can't escape from. They follow you, wearing familiar voices, waiting for you to break your own rules. The medic was talking about trauma counseling, about support services, about how I'd get through this. I nodded and made appropriate sounds, but I was thinking about the emergency beacon, still blinking in the supply shed, about the next engineer who'd arrive, eager and confident, ready to maintain systems in an isolated Arctic station. I wondered if they'd find my cassette tape hidden in the equipment. If they'd listen to my story and think I was paranoid, sleep-deprived, losing my mind to isolation, or if they'd recognize the truth in time to run. Probably not. The station was patient. The station had been feeding for 40 years, and it was always hungry.